me, I have been grant writing for about 15 years in different facets. I first started as an educator in a middle school, and the librarian had said, you know, we could really use some of this items, some hands-on materials, yada yada yada. But I'm not really a strong writer. Are you? And I was a science teacher at the time. And I said, if I knew where to look, I have never written any grants before. So we put our heads together, found some grants, and we started writing them. And she just said, you're much better at this. Why don't you just kind of take it off? And I just kind of took off with it and kept on writing ever since. So I write for my school. I used to write for other schools. I've written, co-authored some different grants. So that is my beginning and still continuing with grant writing. So why do we write grants? We write grants because we need things, and there are people out there who are ready to give us some money, and we want their money without using our money. But nowadays, it's getting really hard to find out who has money, who's willing to give them up. So it's becoming very competitive. And in this competitive world, we always want to write the best grant that we can. And it's not just about what can we do with it in immediate time, but what else can we do with it for the future? How is it going to impact what we do? So there are a couple of features that I'm going to touch on. And these features, these 8 features that I picked, they're pretty general in most grants. And those are the ones that I'm going to talk about. Now, different grants have different requirements. There are different time limits. Some of them are more complicated. Some of them are a lot simpler. Some of them have different dollar amounts, $300,000 or $100 worth of grants. So it's good to explore, start off small, work big, and the worst they can say is no. Doesn't hurt. So number 1, feature 1 is the abstract. And in an abstract, that's the overall summary of what's going to happen with your grant. You're going to include how much you're going to be requesting. It's going to be written in a tone for a general audience because we don't know who the grant authorizers are. Is it a university? Is it a corporation? Is it a community? Who is supplying the money? So we want to make sure that we're going to reach everybody collectively. So watch for guidelines, watch for requirements. Grant writing is very specific, and if you don't follow the rules, they can say no very easily. So very simple requirements, examples. Is it 12-point font? Is it Times New Roman? Is it single or double spaced? Watch for margin width. Watch for page limits. Sometimes we get caught up in writing and writing. Sometimes they say no. 5 pages, that's it. Some want more information. What type of submission file are you going to put it in? A doc, a PDF, spreadsheets? Do they want a hard copy paper, or are you going to email it? So all of those requirements you have to be very careful of. A background statement. Feature number 2. And in this background statement, you're going to include basically your whys. What is it that you want? What's the problem? What's the gap or what's the need that you are looking for, that you're currently facing? And then you're going to provide the data to support your claim. Yeah, you can say, oh, well, our community needs this piece of equipment, but why? What's it going to help? What's it going to hurt if you don't get it? Or what are you going to lack if you don't? Also, who are you serving? Is it for a community? Is it for an organization? Is it to supplement something you already have? And describe some of the challenges. Address the issues why you need this money and why it has not worked so far. 3, partnerships. I always like to look for partnerships because it means that you're not going to just, number one, hoard the money. Number two, it also helps with accountability. So lots of times I look for university partnerships and make sure that we both have a vision on what we want to do to help this community. If we're going to help the police force, or we're going to help a radio station, what is the message that we want to pull out of that? And hey, this is going to help you too. Make sure it's a win-win situation for both of you. List everybody who's going to be involved. Yes, I might have the University of Indiana, but who specifically? What departments? Are there going to be co-chairs? What is going to be their role? Is somebody going to oversee the funding? Is somebody going to oversee the projects? Is somebody going to oversee the community? The outreach, the networking. List who is going to do what. And also how many people are actually going to be impacted once you get the funds. Is this going to be reserved? You're writing a $300,000 grant for 10 people? Well, you better make sure that you can back that up. Or are you going to impact a small community, a Boys and Girls Club, the YMCA, and how many people matriculate through that facility? Make sure you identify all of those. Number 4, strategic planning, analysis, and research. This is the meat and potatoes of the grant writing. First of all, the design of it. Paint the picture. How are you going to use this money? What are all the items you're going to purchase? How are you going to collect your data? And where is that research coming from? Are you and a team going to go out and collect information? Have you historically collected this information and say, hey, we've discovered a need? How are you going to exchange information? So if I'm collaborating with the university, how are we going to meet? Monthly? Are we going to have a roundtable discussion? Are we bringing in community members to bring in their ideas also? How are these meetings how are they going to work? What's that going to look like? How are you going to integrate other partners into problem solving? Do they just get to sit around and just listen to you, or are they actually going to be participating in the discussion process? How is your grant innovative? The grant authorizers are going to look at quite a few different grant submissions before the time is due. What's going to make your grant stick out? And why are they going to want to give your grant the resource? Is it competitive? Are they going to offer 1 grant, 2 grants, 10 grants? Is there a pie that's going to be split? All of that needs to be taken in consideration. And after you receive the grant, how are you going to continue to conduct your meetings? Yeah, all the planning is good, but once you have it, now what? How are you going to say, okay, today we're going to talk about how we're going to do this plan, then we'll set up the next meeting. We're going to have bi-monthly meetings to discuss and make sure we're moving forward. How are you going to measure the project performance? That is very important. Who's going to collect the data? Are you using a classroom? Are you using a neighborhood? A group, a certain age group? How many days are they going to listen to something? You want to have a town hall meeting. Is it going to be a one-shot deal? Or are you going to have it a couple of weekends for the next month or so? How are you going to be successful? Are you tracking how many people come to listen? Are you measuring how many people give input? How do you know it's going to be successful? Also identify how the data is going to be used for future improvements. So now that we've collected this information, we have plans to use this money to help our police force. We want to get them some new equipment because we have some violence on the streets and we want to take care of that. Oh, but if we get this, then later on we can move ahead and get this piece of equipment because they can work hand in hand. Well, we got to get equipment A, B first before we can move on to C, D. So describe that process also. Include timelines or phases. So this grant could be a seed grant. A seed grant is like a startup, a predecessor to future funding, or is this a one-shot deal? Say, hey, if you give us this, this is going to set us and put us on our feet, and we're going to rock and roll and move on and just get going. Budget. There are two pieces to writing a budget. Very important. Number one, the actual budget in a spreadsheet. You have to detail pretty much to the dollar, to the penny, how much you're going to spend where. Get quotes, talk to people, look at vendors. Try to make sure everything is aligned and what you're going to need. Even if you're paying yourself as the grant writer and your time, make sure that you're able to include that. Some grants, they're kind of sticklers on, well, the grant writer should receive no more than 20% of the whole grant. How many other personnel do you have to pay also? Or is this grant writing on a volunteer basis and you're using all of the funds for activities and resources? Make sure all of that is laid out. And then the narrative piece is where you really get to explain everything that's on the spreadsheet, where it's going to be paid out, how it's going to be paid out. Are you going to pay a person hourly? Are you keeping track of it on a sign-in sheet? Are you going to pay out quarterly after a certain amount of tasks are done? So the narrative and the budget go hand in hand and should describe where all the money is actually going. Deadlines, very important also. Grants have submission timelines. You have to submit all of your XYZs. Sometimes they give you a little bit of extensions and if you're trying to get quotes or vendors. But if they have a deadline to meet also on when they're going to award the grant. So you need to make sure you have all of your ducks in a row. Many times grants have renewal cycles. So if you know one is coming up July 1st, you want to start writing it in March or April. Depending on the dollar amount, you want to give yourself, at least 3 to 4 months to start writing a grant. For smaller amounts, if you're pretty used to writing grants or if it's a renewal grant, maybe a month or two. Sustainability is becoming it's becoming more recognized in the grant writing. How are you going to continue your project after this funding period is over? Or is it a one-shot deal? Are you going to continue with partnerships? Do you have somebody else who's going to give a matching gift? Are you looking at other revenue sources to continue on once this funding is over? If it's a good project, are you going to look for other different grants? Or what about if it's a failure? Are you going to try to start over again and then rewrite the grants? That's okay. And how are you going to evaluate what you've done, what you've learned throughout the process? So sustainability is very, very nice to include. Even if they don't ask for it, it's very good to include. Last feature. How are you going to close out your grant reporting? So, you have your money, you bought your equipment, your resources, everybody's happy, it's all spent, and now it is being used. Okay? Your final report. They usually give a couple months after you've obtained everything, you're able to use it. Now they want to know, okay, how did you use it? Do the kids enjoy the playground that you supplied? Was the funding of the equipment of the police force, was that enough for them? Did your goal in reducing gang violence work out? Were your teachers able to conduct all that professional development that they needed? And what was the impact of it? Did you spend all your money? That's very helpful too. If you ask for $300,000, use it all up. Because anything you don't use, they're going to ask for it back. And they might say, well, you didn't use it last time. I don't think we should give it to you this time. So what did you learn, and what are your next steps? I included a couple of grant resources. I'm an Indiana person, so we rely a lot on Purdue. Your local state universities will have their own requirements and techniques, best practices. Rely on those. And then there's the government website also, grants.gov. Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
Can you talk about on the, I know this is a loaded question, but on the board side, or on the grant, whoever is giving out the grant, how does that meeting work when they're looking at all the grants? And again, I know it's kind of loaded, but is it, like I think of a group coming together and like, well, we can initially look at, this person's gonna look at and make sure that they just did what they were supposed to and then doesn't get in front of a board. I guess, to me, knowing a little bit on the end of what's happening when they're choosing.
The ones who are distributing.
Right, and they're picking out a grant, is there information behind that you could share?
So.
To help better understand.
Sure.
What the process we're going through to make it, but.
Sure. So I'll talk about one that I wrote with our city police officers, and it was an anti-gang violence group, and we wrote it along with University of Indiana. I should say Indiana University. And it was a group of professors and a task force, and we got the city police on board. But the grant was coming from the state police. So they were looking at the state police, and they have their uppy-ups and some liaisons on trying, because they recognize this as a problem, and the how to reduce the gang youth. And we've tried some of the same old techniques of, that donate a gun. That doesn't work. There's a bunch of, Indiana likes their guns, so there are trade shows, some of those, we have different names for scarecrows and ghosts and so on and so forth. So we try to reduce those. Does that mean we have undercover cops? What does that mean? So they're trying to pull out experts in the different fields and say, okay, we're racking our minds here. We want to affect Northwest Indiana. We're going to help give them some money so they can rely on some best practices. Now, there's going to be local people who try to apply for that grant and not so local people to apply for the grant. They really want the people that are in it to receive it, but if the grant looks like crap, they're going to give it to somebody else. So they really want to give it to us in Northwest Indiana. But there's a lot of other people that said, oh, no, 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 we have a proven history. And they could be coming from Kansas. And they're more of a management team. And they're gonna come over and then give it still to our city cops and work with still our university, but they are handling, they've been given the money. So maybe not all the money is being distributed like it could be. So, yeah.
I think he's more or less just saying, like, you know, the people who are sitting there deciding, I want this person or that person.
Yeah.
Or do they just like my name, which would be nice, and just give it to me? That's what he's saying. Like, is it a group of people that get
I
together?
want to chime in
Sure.
regarding private foundations, for example, or community foundations. For the most part,
Could you, I have a feeling the microphone is muted, right? Would you like him to use the microphone?
I would, yeah. That would be
Yeah.
great. Thank you.
We just,
Oh, is it all Velcroed and stuff?
no, it's just tangled up. There you go.
In most cases, the larger foundations are going to have program officers who are specifically focused on different areas of interest of that foundation. It may be specifically focusing on education, community safety, whatever the case may be. They're going to review your grant first, just to make sure that it actually fits all the criteria that the board has already predetermined. And when the board convenes, which in many cases is only once or twice a year, they'll go in front and kind of rubber stamp it all. From my experience, the majority of it will lie with that program officer in order to because they're the ones that are really kind of the boots on the ground, understanding the need, understanding who's who, but they're really focusing on the mission of that particular foundation, community foundations as well. They're the people that will kind of look at all of these donations they've received from around the city, all the individuals, businesses, whatever, focusing on a particular area that you may or may not fit into. So boards, yes, they're the kind of rubber stamp on everything, and the really, really big grants, if we're talking millions, they're the ones that are going to make that final decision. For the most part, smaller grants, it's the program officer that is kind of proposing them to the board, and they'll scan through and say, yeah, this looks all good, whatever. It's not quite as involved that way.
And can you show, like, is it bad on a grant writing to show too much of your cards per se? So
No,
let's
they
say
want
like
to-
my city is doing well, but in this small little chunk,
They
we're
want-
writing this grant, but
Yeah,
but in the
they
big
want
chunk,
to see your
we're-
cards.
That's what I'm saying. Like, so, but how much do you give away?
As much, you want to be as transparent as possible. Because if you're caught fudging, that could damage not only this grant, but
Well, not
future ones.
fudging, but
No, I know.
But you're trying to figure out,
You don't want to say you have a ton of money.
Well, I know that was a bad example,
Yeah.
probably.
Yeah, but-
Fudging is, you could say it's kind
They
of,
want-
but you know what I'm saying. Like you
You
want
don't want to give away your ideas with the innovation, but many times now the grants are being made public, so they're going to see it.
right.
No, and like he said, you want to give it away. I don't want to say give it away. It's all propriety.
You could try to keep that mic so that you're talking into it too. Yeah.
I'll probably put it down here. Yes, sir.
What about hiring somebody to do your grant work when you're just don't have that capacity?
Sure. And you're asking if that's good thing, bad thing.
Yeah, is it?
You know, what to look for is to make sure they have a history of grant writing, what their success rate is. Look for dollar amounts that they've worked with. Look for the different organizations and foundations that they've worked with, what their scope is. Sometimes they're pigeonholed into only community service. Sometimes they have a broader scope. Oh yeah, I've done community service, I've done education, I've done community work. So it depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for something for your town, you probably want to get somebody at least from the region who knows the area. At least has a love for the area. Yeah.
So I see the sticking point. So we have a new 501c3. It's called the WCM Program Fund.
Sure.
And one of the things we would like to do is get grants.
Okay.
It's a new organization. we have no track record. We want to do collaborations, but in terms of statistics and that kind of thing, I mean, I'm just like scanning, what would that be? Because, you know, what we're interested in doing is supporting a variety of different independent producers in their work that would be appealing to different regional audiences that would have some impact on communities in some kind of way, you know? So it's very vague. And I guess as I'm talking, I'm thinking, no one's gonna fund us. Anyway, but I think in this situation, I think collaborations are gonna be really
Yeah.
key
Yeah.
to say, okay, I'm gonna be working with a Boys and Girls Club. They are trying to resolve this particular problem. They might have statistics, and then we would be there to do like a video for them or a series of programs for them. But I guess I just want you to talk more about that, about, you know, the role of a track record in getting these grants. You know, how can we convince them that we would be good if we've never applied for a grant before or done things like this before, and then the statistical aspect about it. You know, it's like, you know, there are so many of this and we want to get here, and how do we, you know, all that. That to me is the
So there
hard
are
part.
different grants in mind, you know, you can, all different sizes, all different places. And the worst that can happen is they say no. And my attitude is start writing them with a team and say, what is it that, make sure you have a vision of what you want to use it for. Who can we bring on to help us write this? Maybe I know how this station works, but I'm not exactly sure about how the Boys and Girls Club is going to work. So I'm going to want a representative there. Now we can get a couple people, let's put our head together and say, oh yeah, this $100,000 grant would be really good, and it's going to be a win-win situation. And the research part is going to take some time. That's not a month-long thing. And so you're going to, if you have a grant in mind, and sometimes there are different foundations or writers, underwriters who will take new submissions, new people. They want to see more people getting active in it. They really do. They don't want to keep giving it to the same old, because their vision is usually to help more communities. Because being the fundraisers and philanthropists that they are, they want to be able to say, oh yeah, we've helped all of these different type of diverse communities. So they want to do that. So the more that you can join in and just put your heads together, do the research is hard, but it's not impossible. And even if it's going to take a little bit, what are we looking for? You've got to have some kind of focus, and sometimes your focus will change within the grant writing process too. You start off saying, oh yeah, we want to measure how many students are coming in and out and we're going to interview them, but then find out that what that student population is looking like and say, oh, maybe we need to rewrite this and do it for the families or this particular community. So it's going to evolve and develop, and that's good and that's okay. And the research will come. Even if it's a year, that's still, you don't want to fudge it. And if it hasn't been tackled yet, that's okay, but wherever you're getting your information from, just make sure it's all stated where you're getting from. Join in with the universities, join in with your local police force or schools and say, hey, do you all have any information on this, on these families we're trying to reach out here? You know, and just show it's going to be a win-win situation. Even if you can't give money to everybody, it's going to help out everybody.
Would you give like information or try to submit information that aligns with some of the organization itself? So let's say it's Boys and Girls Club giving out the grant, and you target some of the what you're writing that our city helps benefit the Boys and Girls Club, and would you include some of that side information to associate yourself kind of with the organization or with the way that that organization is moving forward? Is that going to be helpful in any way? Because it's weird to just ask for money,
Microphone.
ask for money straight up, but if you feel like you align with some of that where you're asking for that funds, is that beneficial at all?
Well, maybe let me resituate that.
Sorry, I
question
blabbed a
little
lot.
bit. No, that's okay. For the Boys and Girls Club to give out money they might give out a scholarship, but I don't think they would necessarily
Right,
give
I
out
was
a
just using
grant.
that as an
Yeah,
example.
But then
Pick
to
your
say that,
organization.
it's going to go back to the Boys and Girls Club, that could be like a conflict of interest.
Not
there.
like that. I'm saying like as a city, I could help. We work with said organization, or we do things that are similar to your organization and helping people out. Whatever. You're kind of just picking. You're going along the lines of what that foundation or what that group is giving out. You may align with some of the things that you're doing. So I'm just wondering, like, if you share some of that insight when you're writing about yourself and.
I mean, I would say.
Could you use the mic?
Yeah.
Really,
Yeah. Sorry, come on.
I would say, first of all, that foundation, that organization, they know what they do, right? What you want to present is that you do something similar. I wouldn't necessarily say, oh, see, we're a great match.
But along those lines. Is what
But I
you're
think
getting
it's
at.
simply to say, we do this kind of work. They're smart enough to know we do this kind of work. Maybe there is something here. So I think that's probably as far as I would go with that personally.
Yeah, maybe what I'm getting at is I'm trying to from you guys. I want to know what the competitive advantage is riding them. What are those little things that you can do?
One of the first things I would suggest, call them up and ask them. Talk to somebody involved with it. Talk to them about your idea. Is it worth for us to do this? Give them a 2-minute call and say, can we set up a time to chat? And then do that. Make sure you're going to the same coffee shop. But then have a conversation, explain it, get to know them, and they can know you. And that way you'll get a feel. Maybe they'll say, we're not really doing that right now.
Right.
Or maybe give us a couple of years, our interests will change, whatever the case may be. Have that one-on-one conversation. Most foundations, they are required by law to give away money. It's in their best interest to see if you're something that they can give to. And so having that simple conversation to kind of open the door, not grease the wheels, but just kind of open the conversation to learn more about them, they learn more about you, could save you a lot of time.
And they might even ask you to say, we never thought about that. Let's hear some more about it. Or can you give us a statement? Or, write a proposal. They might not even have that particular grant in their head, but they said, you know what? That sounds really interesting. Let me see if we can fund that.
Yeah. And as I was saying, that kind of gets you in the door with that program officer.
Right. Well,
So
that's
they
what I'm thinking, like,
know
who's the person,
they know
if you're
what
trying
your
to grease the wheels,
what your
so to
grant
speak,
is talking
yeah.
about. And no, even if they say no, no rarely means never.
Sure.
So
Great.
Should we switch speakers?
So yeah, we can just transition right in
Sure.
here. All righty.
we'll trade places.
We're together now, right?
Out of here? Oh,
You get that.
okay.
Because you don't have
All right.
That was easy. So
it. Two, right? Same time.
I'm going to cover some of the same ideas, perhaps go a little bit more in depth, but then talk about some and kind of add on to this a little bit. As some of you who were here last session, my name is Bryce Lord. I'm with the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee and the Helen Bader Institute for Nonprofit Management. I teach fundraising on for our School of Continuing Education, as well as a couple other graduate courses. My contact information is there. Feel free to use it at any time. We're going to talk Teresa covered some of this. I'm going to skip through a lot of it, but mainly kind of defining the different parts of a grant. And I'm looking at this primarily from the lens of private and community foundations and corporate foundations. Public funding is a different beast to me, and I've had my introduction to public funding this last year, and I hate it. So I'm looking at everything else. Okay, working with the city of Peshtigo on something, and I'm so in over my head. Anyway, and talking about just the general grant writing, grant making process. All right, so Teresa alluded to some of this, but we're going to talk a little bit about the planning that goes into before you actually write the grant, what to do afterwards, where to find some of this information, and kind of how to approach it from in a way that will maximize your time. First of all, and Teresa said this, always follow the funder's guidelines. They will put out there a list of requirements, everything from the font to the attachments to all of this. If you don't follow it to the T, there's a really strong chance it'll end in the circular file or the digital trash bin, whatever the case is. They, for the most part, will see hundreds, if not thousands, of grants in a cycle. And they don't have time to fidget and call you up and say, oh, you forgot this. They're just going to make those decisions that you can't follow basic instructions. Why are we going to entrust you with $20,000? It really does boil down to that. A lot of grants use online formats now. Be very aware that only 10% of the foundations in the US have a website. The rest of them do not. That doesn't mean they're not out there. That doesn't mean they're out not giving money. They just are smaller family foundations. They don't necessarily have the staffing or ways to deal with that. They're doing it in a different way. I will tell you, the Wisconsin Philanthropy Network has developed a common grant application for the state of Wisconsin. You can go to their website, download it, and it basically provides, and foundations in Wisconsin recognize it as a legitimate application form to use for some of these other foundations, okay? First thing you want to do is kind of put together a basic boilerplate, a template that you're going to use from grant to grant. These are the elements of the grant, the executive summary, the narrative, which outlines all of this, the grant budget, and any supporting materials that the foundation asks for. You don't get to send in a great video outlining who you are just because you think it's really cool. If they didn't ask for it, they're going to chuck it. In the days when they did paper applications, many of them will require things in triplicate. Don't use staples, things like that, because they've got to make copies for their board of directors. And if everything is stapled, that's that much more work. Things like that. Follow it to a T. What they really want to know is that your program actually addresses a need and it is an appropriate solution to that need. Okay? We want to determine, first of all, what are you trying to achieve? What does success look like? What is the goal of this fund? Is it perhaps to buy new computers for everybody? Is it to address a particular program? What is the end result of that accomplishment? Wait, there we are. Always remember that foundations are big into data. They want measurable outcomes. They don't want just to say, everybody would be so much happier if we had a new computer. Can you point to levels of productivity or the amount of time I'm just trying to think of like an old version of Windows, but the amount of time that it takes to boot up or whatever, what is that measurable improvement? And then finally think of what are your steps for making your program come to life? Really outline it. Again, what does it look like with success? Specifically looking at your objectives, your goals. We kind of talked about this in the social media session before. Looking at defining the future with what your grant, what your program is going to accomplish. That you have check-in points throughout the program, so you're not just all of a sudden waiting till the end to figure out if it's going to work or not. You've got some sort of process of following the improvement, so you can shift if you need to, things like that. Great. One of the biggest issues they're going to look at is, why are you the best organization to do this work? What is it about your organization that puts you at the front of the line for this particular grant? What are your resources? What is your capacity as an organization? What is the community you serve and your connection to it? Why are you the right choice? A lot of funders right now are looking at sustainability. What's your plan to make sure the program has longevity, that has a life after that money runs out? Do you have a plan? Or is it just for a specific amount of time? More and more funders are looking for this sort of sustainability, particularly if you're addressing a need in the community. They want to see that continue on beyond the initial gift, so that they're actually investing money well and not just for the short term. Once you've put all of this together, then I recommend tackling the executive summary. Don't try to do it the other way around. If you've done the whole narrative, you can cut and paste and do the executive summary afterwards, okay? Just to point that out. Seems, for me, it's a no-brainer. But, oh, no! I have it on my phone if I need to.
Did your computer die?
Or I don't know. I think it might have. Anyway, I have it on my phone here. Let me find. Except I closed PowerPoint, didn't I? Well, we'll see if it boots. No worries. I work in academia. We have to pinch hit all the time. Don't do that. Okay, so wouldn't you know? Here we are. Where was I? Okay, supporting materials. As I said, follow the funder's guideline to a T. Include everything they ask for and nothing else. What I would also recommend, if they ask for something that you don't have, say they want 3 years of an audit, and audits are expensive, call them up and say, this is what we do have. Is it okay if we send this anyway? Many times they'll say yes, because they understand the challenge. And if you have something that points to the same information, but perhaps not in the same form, they're going to be likely to accept that. But never do it without permission. Because if it just all of a sudden shows up on when they go through this, they're going to think, again, couldn't follow basic instructions, right?
Make sure to document the person you talk to then.
Likely it's going to be that program officer. Who knows?
Okay, well, just saying.
But
Like,
again-
you hate to
but again-
find out that we disqualified because you didn't get it, but we
If-
talked to so and so and they
Yeah,
said.
absolutely.
Okay.
You know, you want to keep track of that. Once you've submitted the grant, how do you follow up? If the answer is yes, you got the grant, first of all, congratulations. You get the money, you implement the program, keep the funder informed of what you're doing. Give them regular check-ins. They're as much a partner in all of this than they are just a checkbook, right? They are investing in this because they have an interest. Treat them like a partner. Be responsive to any requests they have. Don't wait a week to get back to an email. You wouldn't necessarily treat a partner that way. So don't do it with them. And make sure that you do what you said you were going to do. If they ask you to follow up and provide me with this or so, do it. Because we're not only just maintaining this relationship through this grant, we also want to keep in mind that there are more possibilities down the line. And if you just get the money and run, and then come back to them again with another grant, what are they going to do? What would you do, right? If they say no, like I said before, no is not never. It's not personal. Don't take it personally. It has not, in many cases, it may not have anything to do with you or your organization. You know, say perhaps they could only give out 10 grants, and in the lineup you were number 11. That's the way it happens sometimes. Call them up. Ask why. In most cases, they will tell you. They will have that conversation and say, we just don't think you have the long-term credibility. You didn't clarify your timeline well. They'll let you know for the future reference. In most cases, if they don't give you an answer, I would question whether you really want to work with them in the future anyway. And in that conversation, say, would it be all right if we submitted to you in the future? In some cases, they'll say, no, we really don't do this. You're best looking elsewhere. In most cases, they will say, sure, go ahead and give it another try next cycle, whatever the case may be. If they do say, no, forget about it, move on. There are other fish in the sea, just move on and find other ones. With the grant in general, just start with an outline of what it is you're trying to do. Be very detailed, and then in just laying out your program, the funding, where the money's going, your budget. You want to include both direct and indirect costs. If you have staff working on it, make sure you include fringe. All of that to make sure that every aspect of what the money is going towards is in your proposal. The narrative proposal is just an explanation of what's in the budget. Frankly, most funders will go to the budget first. So make sure it's as thorough as possible. I wanted to mention a couple of things about where to find grants. Teresa gave you a couple of resources. There are more. Online, there are several different, maybe you've heard of the Foundation Directory. It's an online database that's put out by Candid, which now owns GuideStar, the Foundation Directory, and what used to be GrantSpace. I say this because I'm a certified trainer for Candid. I give regular instruction on how to use the Foundation Directory, all of that. You can buy an online profile, an online account. They're kind of expensive. If you live in Madison, Milwaukee, or Stevens Point areas, there are UWM, for example. You go to the Golda Meir Library on campus. There are 10 computer terminals in our lobby right outside the coffee shop. You can log in and use it to your heart's content, the professional account that the campus has. Marquette has that also, UW Stevens Point, UW Madison. And it is a huge database of foundations that's built for grant analysis. It pulls from all their 990s. You will learn the grants they have made in the past, to who, to whom, for how much, all of that information, as well as their guidelines, their giving cycles, all of that information. It's great. I think it's great. I will tell you, and don't tell Candid I told you this, but there is a database out there very similar called Impala. If you go to impala.digital, it's a lot less expensive, and you can, for the time being, get a free profile and get a lot of the same information. So that's really great. I think that's what I got for you. Any questions? Yeah.
Like for WCM,
Mm-hmm.
they wanted their new program. Writing a grant and showing they've already been established in another program, wouldn't that benefit them also?
Yeah, I was thinking about this when you were talking about the 501c3 being new. Don't underestimate the fact that this is a spin-off of WCM, right? WCM?
Yeah.
And the fact that you do have longevity. Maybe not for this particular fund, but for the organization itself, you have a proven track record there that you can, to a degree, piggyback off of. And perhaps, and I would suggest, again, if you talk to program officers about that, they're likely, I think, to say, oh yeah, because this kind of thing is not unusual. But yeah, don't underestimate the fact that the organization itself has a track record. In many cases, you'll get people who just start a nonprofit and they have no track record. You're trying to find a holy grail of grants. You need to have, those organizations need a couple of years to kind of prove their mettle. One other thing to keep in mind for the standard nonprofit, just generally across the country, grants account for only about 25% of the average revenue portfolio. Primarily, it comes from earned income, membership fees, whatever the case may be. Obviously, your organizations, everybody's a little different, but I caution against going out there thinking a grant is going to save the day. In fact, a lot of funders will want to see some other funding coming in, again, to prove your sustainability. So, yeah.
The executive one-page summary, I know you said write that last. Is that predominantly what they look at
Yeah,
first?
yes.
And then they'll look at the package. They will
Exactly.
look at this, oh, that looks
They'll
good.
look at the
then I'll
executive
read-
summary to see what this is all about.
Mhm.
Then they'll flip to the budget to see if it actually makes sense. And then, look at everything else. That tends to be how it works. But so the executive summary, really, you need to explain just in a paragraph, maybe two, what your program is all about.
One or
And why.
two?
Yeah. And then, but again, you're providing more information for them to look
And
at.
you have to hit
But
some
you
big
have to really
punches.
provide a succinct recap of it all.
When you
Yeah.
get deeper into that, then how, I wrote details, but is there too much? Like, where's that, how much do you really want to explain? Like, if you're talking about yourself and you're trying to,
There are different parts of the profile of the grant that you want to do, the narrative. Part of it is going to be about your organization to prove your worth and your experience. And I don't know, what are your thoughts?
I guess you could go overboard at anything, just talking about
Yeah,
yourself.
I mean,
or
keep
your-
in mind, a lot of foundations that are using online platforms, there's a character count. That'll dictate how much detail you provide. But if you have written your narrative ahead of time, it'll be a lot easier to cut and paste, and figure out where the most important bits are. So,
If I could, sometimes there are page limits. They don't accept any more than 10 pages, and they'll say the budget narrative should not be more than 2 to 3 pages, or the executive summary or abstract should only be 1 page or so. They will sometimes specify limits, so my suggestion is write it all out and then trim where you need to and make sure it's relevant information that they need.
sure. Anything else?
Can you write it for us?
Hell no.
All right, where's that rating card, Mary?
Yeah.
If we're looking for a certain amount of money for a
Mhm.
certain would you recommend, I have a couple questions, using your grant with different sources?
Mhm.
So writing it out, say I'm looking for $25,000 for media equipment,
Mhm.
and I find 4 grants. Submit to all 4, and then have my first standard, and then pick and choose to gear towards that.
Yeah,
for what I
absolutely,
want. But I would
absolutely.
have a basic, like maybe the narrative wouldn't change as much, I would
No,
think.
no. If it's the same program, same organization, use the same information. Make sure it's not completely boilerplate, that you adjust it to this particular foundation,
Right.
because they'll see through it. I will tell you, research shows that only 1 in 3 grant applications gets funded, period. So if you're looking for $20,000 and you're submitting, and you decide maybe you need 5,000 from 4 different grants, be prepared to submit 12 proposals, applications, whatever. And so that'll help dictate. But then also those initial conversations with the program officers, with foundation reps, will really help you pinpoint where you need to focus. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wrote your question.
Yeah, that's fine. We've
So-
still got a couple minutes here.
Yeah, after you've written your 12, you get 4, so when your follow-up,
Mm-hmm.
that would kind of be similar, because your follow-up would be your data, how you used it,
Mhm.
blah, blah, blah. So you don't have to, when you're following up, it doesn't have to be as different or as geared towards it, because you're giving them the data from what you used the money
Exactly.
for.
Exactly. Yep.
And just maybe at the end, the suck-up, thank you, so.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Exactly. I mean, it's in many ways it's all the same information. Just make sure you get it to the people that want to know it. Yeah.
Okay, I know you're part of the grant department, I believe it is, at Azure. You work with that.
The
you're
Helen
in
Bader,
nonprofit
the Helen
section.
Bader Institute. Yeah.
So, are there people over there that help? Are there classes?
Well, I will tell you, I mentioned that I'm affiliated with Candid. We have what we call our Nonprofit Skills Academy. We do have hour-long online free virtual classes. In fact, this information was from them. Just check our website, our events calendar, and register for them. It's all very basic fundraising, basic grant writing, basic grant budgets, finding grants, that kind of thing, how to use the foundation directory, that kind of thing.
Is that like a membership that you can
Nope.
That's
Nope.
the membership one you're talking about?
Nope, not at all.
No, it's free class. It's free.
It's
Well,
all
I mean,
free.
classes, but I was like, you have to be a member to get the free class, like that.
Not
sort
at
of
all.
thing.
Not at all.
Okay.
And gradually we'll be adding more, but this is kind of what we've got right now. We also, so I don't need to go into all that backstory. But yeah. And it'll be me teaching them. So
And they're online.
they are online on Zoom. It's on Zoom. So a couple times a year we'll do each of them, once or twice a year. Yeah. And we will be having later this year a 2-day workshop, a grant writing workshop, where you actually end up writing a narrative. So look for that. That's not free though. So
And that's UW?
UW Milwaukee. Look up uwm.edu/HBI. We have a 2-day statewide nonprofit conference coming up in July too. So check out registrations for that.
Last,
Don't worry, Mary's out of the room.
Yeah, yeah.
no, last question.
Uh-huh.
And I think I have most of them, but how much do you think it is to pay someone to write a grant for you? Or do they do percentages wise?
You should
They
never do
shouldn't.
it by percentage. It should be flat fee.
Flat fee.
Yeah, because if you do a percentage, that's taking money away from you, from your grant. Never go by a percentage rate. I would also suggest connecting with the Association of Fundraising Professionals. This is an international organization, mainly based in the U.S. There are chapters, very active chapters in Milwaukee and Madison. Milwaukee, for example, does have actually a grant writers forum where they get together every month and all of that. But if you are involved in grant writing, it's a great resource. If you join AFP, you have access to the national website, which includes tons of tools and templates, as well as training and all of that. So yeah,
Thank you
that's
guys
all.
so much.